Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. Today I'm reviewing an enormously expensive piece of rolling stock from EFE Rail. So my motivations for this review are quite funny. If you remember, a few weeks ago I reviewed the Bachmann Pressflow wagon, which was an enormously expensive model. The RRP for that was £51.95. And while in my review I found that it probably wasn't worth that, there actually was a pretty good reason why that model should have been quite expensive. It was complex, it was very well detailed. Well, not today, a little while ago, I found a model that on RRP was even more expensive than that. It's an EFE Rail model. I thought, really? This has got to be worth a try, hasn't it? Can this really be worth more than the Pressflow, or is it just a bit of a rip-off? So I decided to pick it up. It is this. It's the EFE Rail PRA China Clay wagon. And this was £1 more expensive on RRP. So the RRP for this was £52.95. Goodness gracious me, and surprise, surprise, it seems these didn't sell very well because at Rails they are now 38% off, where you can get these for £32.50, which by and large seems to be more like the right price for a model like this. So I thought I could justify that. Let's take a look at this. Is this better than the Pressflow, or is it actually just a bit expensive? Now, there might be a reason why this is quite expensive. To be fair, that's not to say it's worth the money, but there might be a reason at the very least. And that is that these were introduced in the mid-1980s. They worked the whole length of the UK, but they were a very small fleet. There was only 14 of these built. And more than that, they stopped being used in the early 1990s, so there wasn't many of them, and they didn't last very long. So that's a very weird choice for a model, but maybe lack of demand for these caused the high price. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean a model is worth it, does it? So we'll find out today. Anyway, if you want to try one of these for yourself, like I say, they are reduced very heavily at the moment, so check out the affiliate link if you want to. For now though, what is this like? Let's see. So China Clay, the stuff these wagons would carry, is actually fascinating stuff. It's brilliant white in colour and it has all sorts of uses. It's got boring uses like it's used in ceramics, but it's also used to make paper. It has medical uses as well. And I've also read that it's used as a filler in cosmetics. So does that mean that people actually pay to put China Clay into their faces to make them look more youthful? What a world we live in. But anyway, you've not got to worry about any of that here. I'm all natural, you'll be pleased to hear. Let's not go into too much detail on that. Anyway, it's a China Clay wagon. Let me show you the end of the box. So it's a weird label, this, EFR E87063. It's a PRA China Clay wagon, BLS, it's number 6311, and ear, apparently. So I look forward to opening the box and having Van Gogh's ear drop onto the carpet. Hopefully it's dried out by now and doesn't make a mess. Anyway, let's, goodness, I don't see any ears. Maybe it's going to listen to every word I say and report back to Bachmann and EFE Rail. That's a more sinister joke. Anyway, there it is. Interesting packaging. We do have accessories, but no instructions. So what to do with these, I'm not entirely sure. Are those buffers? Yeah, they do look like buffers. So does the model have the option to have buffers added? Are the buffers not fitted? We've also got moulded screw-link couplings, which is a bit insulting, isn't it, on a model that costs £53 RRP? Couldn't we have made those movable? I'm getting a bit of an atmosphere around this model already. But let's have a look at the model. Let's unwrap it. Should be quite a complex thing, really. And it does look it, to be fair. Gosh. Complex in its physical detail, there's a lot of parts, but also in its print work. Okay, well, let's lift this up then. Here we go. And there it is, the PRA wagon, which didn't cost me £53. Needless to say, I wouldn't have bought it if that was the asking price. But for £32.50, I thought this was more worth a try. And yeah, it certainly does seem to be very complex. There is a lot of detail on here and a lot of fine parts at that too. So let's have a much closer look at this wagon then, and we'll see exactly what detail this has to offer. Okay, it's obvious why this is quite expensive. It is an insanely complicated model, possibly even more so than the Pressflow I looked at. The second thing that has now become clear is the reason for the additional buffers. So I put this model back into its box to film some more shots of it in the box, and inexplicably when I next took the model out of the box, both of the buffers on this end had been broken off. So I must have just put it into the box slightly weirdly, maybe at a slightly different angle. Both of them broke off. So these buffers are made of plastic, and it's obvious that they are very flimsy and prone to breaking. EFE Rail obviously know this, hence why we've got an entire set of additional buffers included in this pack. Which on the one hand is a good thing. I mean, assuming I can dig out the remaining buffer from this housing, I should be able to replace them. But also, why on earth are we using cheap plastic buffers like this? It actually seems as though EFE Rail have gone to some trouble to ensure that we've got cheap plastic buffers instead of metal ones, because they've actually had to make twice as many buffers as they need to send out 8 buffers per model as opposed to 4. Why are we going for the cheapest possible option on a model that costs £53 at its full price? Tell you what, it's a good job customers don't always go for the cheapest possible option, isn't it? Otherwise they wouldn't be touching this blooming thing with a barge pole. Although maybe that is what happened, and that's why they've now had to be reduced to a somewhat more reasonable price. Yeah, it bugs me that I expect all the features and details that are humanly possible when a model costs this much. But on the whole, yeah, that is what we've got. Apologies for the slightly heated rage in my voice there. Anyway, yeah, decoration, fantastic. It is a simply painted model, although we do have the sort of top. Is this a tarpaulin or is it a solid top in real life? I'm not too sure, but that's been painted red. I do think a lot of the detail parts though are self-coloured, and I think that because there's almost a bit of a translucency to the ladder here. I don't know if that's the case, but if it is, again, that's a little bit naughty for the price because these parts do look a little bit plasticky. But anyway, there's lots of prints on the side. There's the data board there, PRA, some other small details printed onto there. I mean, there is a lot of decoration on this model, and it does look very, very good. Same with the running plate as well, or the sole bar. Yeah, beautiful printing. We've also got the axle boxes picked out as well, and even some printing on the ends with these danger signs. But the most impressive aspect of this model is the detail and the separately fitted parts. So here's a look at the axle boxes. Yep, they look absolutely fine. We've got the brake handle here, and from the side there's quite a lot of underframe detail, although it's not fully realistic on the base. I think the press float did this better, and honestly, rolling stock that costs this much usually does have a fully detailed underframe. This doesn't. It doesn't have the full brake rigging, it doesn't have the underframe structure, but you know, for the most part that isn't going to matter. Again, just raises a question over the price. From the sides and top of the model though, this is enormously complex. So this sort of rail across the side here, that is a separate part. Each of these little struts, maybe these are cables in real life, those are separate parts. So how many have we got? We've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 on this side, 10 on the other side, that'll be 20. Then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 16 on both sides. So we've got 36 of these tiny little struts fitted across the model, all individual. I mean, that must have some sort of cost attached to it. And despite all being made of plastic, these railings and such, these are relatively complex as well. They are quite flimsy, but to be fair, they seem to sit relatively straight. And if they are flimsy rather than brittle and easy to break, I guess I would prefer that, provided they sit straight, which they do seem to. We've also got etched metal parts on here as well. So this little walkway here, that is an etched part, so that's great quality. I like that. Also, the little sort of catwalk on the ends, that's a separately fitted etched part as well. And look, it's even got little separate supports holding it up as well, or at least they would hold it up in real life. And then this piece across the top is a separately fitted part as well. So yeah, it is enormously complicated. I don't know how many separate parts there are on this thing, but it's got to be getting close to the record for a piece of rolling stock. So yeah, to an extent, I can see why the price would be necessary. I do think though, at that price, all of the stops needed to be pulled out, and I think it's fair to say they haven't been. So plastic buffers, as I've already said, not only are the buffers plastic, they're not sprung or anything. Again, that's fine, but you know, charge a bit less maybe. We do have very simple couplings. They're not kinematic, which given the wheelbase of the model is not the greatest. We've also got a stepped coupling here, which again defeats the whole point of having NEM couplings, because you're supposed to be able to take these out and put any coupling you like in. Well, you can't. Now you have to put one in that's stepped as well, which is not ideal. So yeah, that's a bit rubbish. Again, the underframe is quite basic on this. We don't have proper screw-link couplings that are movable. Again, that's a shame. And while the wheels are metal, they don't sit into separate bearings or anything. Again, with models that cost this much, I would expect every possible feature. So question mark over the value for sure, but the level of detail is certainly absolutely brilliant. So with that, let's get this down onto the track. Let's see how it performs. Let's test those couplings and let's hope for a faultless performance. So here is today's test setup then. For today's locomotive, I've chosen the Class 47, just because, no particular reason. Here is the China Clay wagon, ready to be tested, and just so that there's more rolling stock besides just that in the train, I've set up some Hornby hoppers. First of all then, how free rolling is this? The answer is not very. Yeah, it's quite a stiff runner, unfortunately, and for once it's nothing to do with the brakes. I've checked, none of the brakes are touching the wheels, so it's an axle box design thing. Now, it'd be too simple to say this should just have separate bearings and that would fix the problem, because we've seen models without separate bearings which are marvellously free rolling. So it just needs something different with the axle boxes, whether that is metal bearings, which is probably best for the price, or just a better free rolling axle box design. The truth is, we have seen better. What about couplings then? They are stepped couplings, which I don't like, but provided they are stepped correctly, hopefully that will mean no issues. So let's see, backing up the 47. Doesn't seem ever so good, really, does it, that? Right. Okay, so what's happening there? Let's just back up. Is that because of the Hornby hoppers or because of the wagon today? Let me grab a Bachmann wagon. They're normally pretty good. Okay. Bachmann open wagon, these are pretty good benchmarks. Okay, yeah, that's coupled perfectly. So it's probably the Hornby hopper wagons then, fair enough. EFE rail mops a sweating brow. Okay, so if I do this manually then, no, well, that wasn't manually, that was just coupling faster. Come on, Sam, get with the program. No, that should be all right. So that's the silly Hornby hoppers, you know, such is Hornby. Right, are they going to stay coupled now? Yes, more or less. All right, well, let's bring this forwards and then back it over the points just to make sure it's nice and reliable. Right, so I might regret my choice of train for today, because if there's a problem with these Hornby hoppers, and I can't remember if there is, then this is all going to go something up, isn't it? Well, let's see, here comes the China Clay now. And it's the only wagon in the train that's started to tip to the side. That's actually quite remarkable, isn't it? But no, that is quite a bad look, really, isn't it? So now, oh, for God's sake, I'm going to have to, I'll tell you what, let's get a different engine. Let's move this Class 40 out the way. And let's get a different engine to try just the China Clay and some simple Bachmann wagon, just so that we can try that. Right, there we go, it's now coupled as part of a simple train. Let's try that again. Okay, that's better. So I would say then, the Hornby hoppers don't have kinematics, and this China Clay wagon doesn't have kinematic couplings either, and I think they just didn't agree with each other. Which is not really that great, is it? So if you can couple this thing to short wheelbase wagons or locomotives or wagons which have kinematic couplings, you should be all right. Although I don't think the Bachmann 08 has kinematics. Does it? I forget. No, I don't think it does. But yeah, it didn't like being coupled to the Hornby hoppers. Anyway, let's get it going around the track. Let's see if anything's different around the curves. Actually, no, probably scratch that. I think what really happened was the couplings slid over each other in reverse like that. The buffers got too close together and then they buffer locked. Look at that, look how close the buffers are. And that's not the EFE rail model's fault, that's Hornby's fault for having couplings that either don't sit straight or are at the wrong height, or both. But in forwards, I wouldn't expect to see that, but let's see. Right, excuse the high speed if you will. This Bachmann 47 slows to a crawl if I don't run it at half power or more, as you can see. Well, actually it's slowed to a crawl anyway. But anyway, that's not the focus. The China Clay wagon is the focus, and even at alarmingly fluctuating speeds, it's still perfectly reliable over curves. So when coupled to non-faulty rolling stock, it's fine over points. And even when coupled to faulty rolling stock, around curves it's absolutely fine. So apart from the freewheeling issue, the performance is absolutely fine. So I'm quite impressed with this model, to be honest. Yes, it's expensive. It isn't anymore because I think it was too expensive and they've had to reduce it. So price isn't much of a problem anymore, which means actually we've got a very niche model here, which is available at a more reasonable price than it was, and it is quite a complex model in its detailing. So if you want one of these, I would probably recommend it right now, because like I say, it is niche. They're not going to be doing another batch of these, at least not anytime soon, because why would they? They've had to be heavily reduced. They're not going to be clamoring to get the factory onto making more of these, which again would probably have to be discounted. So now seems like a good time. If you want to get one of these, affiliate links down in the description. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. Not a bad wagon. Let's have some ratings then for the PRA China Clay wagon by EFE Rail. So the level of detail is a bit of a mixed bag, but on the whole I would say it's really, really good, and I've given it 4 star. So this is a very complex wagon, both in terms of decoration, because there's lots of printing on this, and also in terms of separately fitted parts. So all of those little cables or struts, all of those were individually separately fitted. We've got etched walkways, we've got separately fitted railings and ladders. To say this is a piece of rolling stock, it is marvellously complex. On the other hand though, we've just got cheap plastic buffers, not metal ones, and they're not sprung either. The underframe, when you look at it from underneath, is quite basic. It doesn't have the full underframe detail that some wagons do. A lot of people won't care about this, so if you don't, that's fine, you can ignore it, but it's worth mentioning. And also the screw-link couplings, they're not the greatest. They're kind of molded static dummies. Normally with models that cost this, you'd expect to see more realistic couplings than that. Again, only a minor thing, but it does mean that I'm giving this 4 star instead of 5. Performance on the whole is really good. I've given it 4 star. They seem to couple okay when you've got the right rolling stock. Fine over points, fine over curves. Not keen on the stepped couplings. I think that's annoying, but at least if you're using tension locks, they won't be a problem. They're just not very free rolling, these. Again, it probably won't be an issue that much if you're using a powerful loco and you've not got that many. But again, compared with other wagons, they're just not that free. The quality I've given 4 star. They're nicely built, actually, certainly well painted. I didn't see any sort of wonky details or anything like that, but they are plasticky models. It weighs in at just 57 grams, which could have been a little bit better, I suppose, given how bulky this is. And you've got details like the buffers, which are so plasticky that 2 of mine actually broke. And I'd be honest with you, if I dropped it or knocked it, I would tell you that. All I did was put it into the box. Maybe I did it too roughly, maybe I got it in upside down or something, I don't know. When I took it back out again, the buffers had broken off. They did provide spare buffers, which is a good job, but yeah, they are kind of easy to break, so be very aware of that. Value for money then is a mixed bag. I think £52.95 is too much for this. It doesn't matter how detailed it is. I think that's just a lot for a piece of rolling stock. They've been reduced now though to £32.50 each, which I think is much better. At that price I would give it 4 star, the RRP's 2 star. I'll split the difference and give it 3 star. I think maybe the way this has been produced is a bit inefficient. It's very awesome that all of those little cables or struts are separately fitted, but it can't be denied that's a little bit extravagant, isn't it, for a niche piece of rolling stock. I can't help thinking if those parts had just been moulded on and the model could have been sold for less money, maybe £10 cheaper or so, then this would have been a better seller. And let's be clear, because now that they haven't sold, they've had to be reduced by £20 instead of the 10 that I'm suggesting. So there is something in this, isn't there? But yeah, 3 star. If you buy them now, they're at the right price. At the full price, definitely not. Overall then, that is 7.31 out of 10, or a score of D. Now it really is the price that has dragged this down. If I could have given this a 5 on value, it would have gotten an A, which obviously would be a much better look. I just think for the full price of these models, or 10 to 15% off from the full price, they really ought to have delivered more. So into the logbook this goes then, and it is 9th place, just above the Hornby Shark Wagon and below Bachmann's ZDO. Alright then folks, well I think that will just about do it for this review. Thank you very much for watching. As always, please do comment down below and let me know what you think about this. Have you got one? What is your experience? If not, what did you think about it based on this review? I always love to hear your thoughts, so please don't be shy, feel free to share them. For now though, thank you ever so much for watching. I will see you again very soon for another review. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers everybody.